Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and it's not Spawn year, it's day 59 of my comic review video day calendar. I'm getting this one done right down to the wire, real late, hopefully gonna get it up before midnight, so I technically got it done today. I need to find some time to get more ahead on these, but I'm gonna make this one pretty lickety split, and not to phone this in or anything, but A, like I said, it is late and I gotta get this video up, but B, this one is not real impressive and I'm not going to have a ton to say about, but I thought it might be an interesting experience, so I took a look at it. You know, you win some, you lose some. This is Green Arrow number 81, and I reviewed a Mike Grell issue that was a real good standalone kind of Christmas time thing. I think it was issue 13 maybe. It was a really good jumping on point, and I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the issue right after Mike Grell leaves, because I just happen to have that and was kind of surprised to see different credits, and so I did a tiny bit of research and wanted to make sure that this wasn't just a fill-in issue and that this was indeed when the next guy comes on, and it in fact is. So Kevin Dooley has a short stint on this book. He was an editor at DC and did quite a bit of writing as well. And I don't know how long he was on this book, but it wasn't a real long time. I couldn't find the exact numbers, but it wasn't very long. I suspect probably 8, 10, 12 issues maybe. So not the beginning of a huge run or anything, but this is basically a transition issue to get Oliver Queen to a new status quo, and it does some recapping and tries to be a good jumping on point, but it's not a real compelling narrative, and I think there's just some really strange writing in this, and I think Oliver reads about as whiny as I've ever read him. This really reads like a bad episode of early Arrow. So not later on when it becomes a little bit more of a cartoon show, but when you still could kind of take it seriously, but then it would just have a kind of dud episode where Oliver seems a little bit out of character and he's even more brooding and unreasonable than usual. This is an Oliver Queen that is lashing out. He is at kind of the end of his rope. Dinah Lance has left him, so he doesn't have really any reason to stick around in Seattle anymore. Really just any comic that opens with this full page spread, you're like, what is going on? This is the very next thing you do right after Mike Grell, is you just have this insane supervillain. I mean, I love fun, over-the-top superhero stuff, but Green Arrow is, during this period, during the 80s and early 90s with Grell, and of course he had a super long run on this, 80 issues, did Longbow Hunters before that, did Green Arrow in Action Comics, I think, even before that. So, I mean, real long history with this character, but usually some pretty down-to-earth, gritty crime drama stuff. And just like Batman, he could have his occasional real goofy supervillain too, and I haven't read everything with Mike Grell, so there might be even more of that than I realize, but there's this kind of there's this attempt at hanging on to that tone while also getting goofier all at the same time. And I would think you'd want to kind of either carve out your own flavor and make it real clear what the book is going to be moving forward, or really continue with what Grell was doing as best as possible. And this is not finding a great tonal balance, I don't think. So once again, written by Kevin Dooley with art by Jim Aparo, and I've always liked Aparo on Batman. I don't know that I've really seen very much of his art in anything else, and this is real moody. There's lots of atmosphere here. I love how he draws rain and lightning. I kind of just want to look at the pictures here and not read so much in the way of dialogue and narration, because, again, a lot of it is real melodramatic, and I get that Oliver's at a real low point, but he's just not very sympathetic. Like I said, he just seems kind of whiny, and he is constantly lamenting that Dinah has left him and that he doesn't really have any reason to do anything anymore. And he's a lot of these, I should say too, a lot of these narrations are just wholly skippable and kind of wasting time. And it feels like it's trying to pad out the 22 pages when this story could have probably been told in like 10. Because again, it really is just a transition issue. The point of this is just to give Oliver an excuse to move on from Seattle, go someplace else, and he talks about maybe going to San Francisco at the end of this. I don't know if that's where he ends up in the next issue, but he and Diana tried to settle down here. You get this recap page where you get you get flashbacks real quick to, with a kind of a typical full page or almost full page kind of montage of different things that have happened recently in Oliver's past, and you see all of the tragedy and mistakes he's made and things that weren't his fault that still helped push Dinah away. Apparently, she was kidnapped and tortured by some guy in a basement or something, and I didn't know about that. That's pretty messed up. Early 90s DC and late 80s was not afraid to go to those horribly violent and real screwed up, kidnappers, serial killers, human trafficking, drug lords, those kinds of places in a way that we tiptoed around it a lot more before that. We really are not concerned with whether or not the Comics Code Authority is signing off on our comics anymore, which is a good thing because they're not reading super censored and they can tackle any kind of story that they want to. And so you want to feel for Green Arrow, and I hope that he finds a way to make it work with Dinah. But he says, under no uncertain terms, she's not going to take him back. He's going to have to come up with something else to do with himself. And he was trying not to be a superhero anymore, it seems like, which is why he went to Seattle. And one thing I do like about this issue is there's a lot of discussion about the pros and cons to this city as a big city that in Oliver's mind is kind of masquerading as a small town in certain ways. And he talks about the weather and how it's all the rain that it's constantly getting somehow makes him feel like it's a facade of being a small town, even though it's clearly, a massive city. And he talks about how it's even bigger than Detroit, but it doesn't feel that way. And they don't get supervillains there. I don't know if Detroit does in DC. I typically prefer my DC to not have a lot of real cities in it. And at the same time, though, it kind of makes sense that if you are going to deal with more real places and realism in DC, Green Arrow would be a good place to do it because, again, it's so much more street level, and he's just a guy going around with a bow and arrow who is deeply flawed, making a lot of mistakes, and, kind of like Daredevil, just constantly getting himself into trouble and having to, clean up messes and having a difficult time not making some of the same mistakes over and over again. I think those are really comparable characters. But anyway, there's this real, I keep throwing around the word melodramatic, but it really is that. He basically gets into this ultimatum with himself where he says, if I have found the one supervillain that there has ever been in this city, and if I decide to take him on, that means that I'm just full on doing the superhero thing again, and if I am a superhero, I'm too good for this city because it doesn't really have villains, and after all, I used to be a Justice League member. So if I do decide to break up this fight and take down this villain whose name is Shrapnel, and I don't know how he got like this. I don't know how he's become this Shrapnel guy, but you've got Shrapnel, and he's fighting this would-be superhero named Nukion, and they're fighting over some woman. And there's kind of some forced parallels with what Green Arrow is going through that I didn't find compelling at all. And Oliver says, okay, if I break this up, that means I'm a superhero again, and I'm leaving the city. And that's ultimately what ends up happening. And it almost reads, I don't know, superstitious isn't the right word, but the way he gives himself this choice, like it defines his character fully somehow. He's really strange and really forced in there, and it's just kind of counterintuitive, a really odd choice that this very silly situation, because I can't decide how much it's supposed to be played for comedy. And again, that balance just isn't found. This really silly situation is the thing where Oliver decides, okay, this is who I am now. It might have been more compelling if the stakes were a little higher and if he was breaking up some kind of, like a mugging or a kidnapping or something that was, closer to the horrible ordeal, the horrible trauma that Dinah went through that is part of the reason that they're not together anymore. I feel like this should be a much more somber, more serious, dreary kind of comic, and on certain pages it is, and then the thing that we're supposed to take as the Oliver's main motivation for changing his whole life is a really goofy, just a really goofy and silly situation that is kind of a dime a dozen with this period with DC. And I've seen these things blended together a lot better, and Jim Aparo has drawn some of those things, because Nightfall has quite a bit of that, particularly early Nightfall. You get, odd out there villains like Film Freak and stuff, while at the same time the book is able to take itself, not too seriously, but like you buy the fiction and you buy, I guess what I mean is the characters all seem in character, even though there's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheekness to the absurdity of the whole thing. And I think the problem is that while the situation is over the top, it's taken me this long to figure out how to articulate this. The problem is that while the situation itself is over the top, and that's not necessarily a problem, but then Oliver himself is over the top in no fun, in this really melodramatic sort of way. So I'm not buying the bleakness of it. Anyway, there's this girl that Shrapnel is obsessed with and wants to try to get with, even though he's a big pile of metal. So I don't really know how he's going to date anybody, but he wants to prove to her how wonderful it would be to be with him. Good luck. And sorry about that. That's a sad, that's a, unfortunate, small straw that you've drawn, but I don't even see how, there'd be compatibility issues there. And then this guy Nukion, who says that the Atom is his godfather, okay, is trying to, be the knight in shining armor and come to her rescue. And she says that that she was just nice to Shrapnel, and then he took that too far and decided that meant that they were boyfriend and girlfriend now, I guess. And so there's bystanders that are kind of rooting for Green Arrow and hoping that he'll take down this bad guy and stop this fight that's broken out with this wannabe superhero. And so he's being encouraged to get back into, as he calls it, the superhero game. And he's got the responsibility thing where he can't help but get involved and start doing his Robin Hood thing again. And he doesn't want to do that, but ultimately, and by the way, at the beginning of the issue, he had already kind of gotten back into this because, of course, he's prowling around in his outfit, so I don't totally understand what he's talking about. Like, it seems like he's still been being a vigilante, but I guess, And this is why it seems so arbitrary to me. It's like something about I'm fighting a supervillain means I'm a superhero now. Okay, and there's even talk from a cop at the end of this who's like, see, I knew that you being around, like I guess he's been going around in costume. You being around draws the crazies out, and Green Arrow says it has something to do with the leotards. Like we're magnets for each other. Okay, I mean, it's just a coincidence. Like, I guess it is a little bit superstitious. He happens to be wearing his costume and going around and stopping vandalism, and that's what I was getting at the beginning. There's a guy who's just drawing his and his girlfriend's initials in an alleyway, and Oliver is kind of taking out, and this is part of why I'm finding him so likable, is the way he's introduced in this issue. And of course, I'm reading this out of context, but he, like, just taking out his issues on this guy, decides that if he moves a muscle, Oliver is going to shoot the spray can, and it's gonna go, it's, you know, gonna like slash his hand. And that seemed like overkill for what he's doing. Like, he's just spray painting in an alleyway. Like, yeah, it's illegal. And Oliver's like, oh, you're trashing my town. And Oliver doesn't really care that much about this town because, like, he and Dino aren't together anymore, and that's the only reason that he's here. So, anyway, he's super unlikable from the beginning. And then by the end, Oliver has this big speech where he kind of dresses down everybody involved in this whole thing. And he's like, shrapnel, he says, if a woman wants you out, you better be packed. He's like, leave her alone. She's not interested in you. You're no good. And then he says, Nucleon, fight for someone who doesn't want it, and you're fighting yourself. So he's got like these big beefs with the way that everybody's handling the situation, basically saying that they're kind of all acting like children. And you could argue that he's not much better than they are. And that's exactly what they say to him. I don't understand what he's saying to Nucleon. I guess I said, did I call him Nucleon earlier? I guess Nucleon is his name. He goes, he's basically saying that the person you're fighting for doesn't want you to fight for her. Is what I'm reading from that. I guess that's what that's supposed to mean. But 2 pages ago, she said, leave him alone. He's just trying to help me out. So I don't even know what he's talking about. Like, what he's saying makes sense. It is as a moral to that guy if that's what he was doing, but she in fact was appreciating his help, so I don't understand that. And then he says, and if there's one thing I don't need right now, it's another woman in my life. And when she, you know, snaps back at him over that, that's kind of understandable because she just gave him like a peck on the cheek for saving her, and then he's going off on her like she wants to be in a relationship and he's not interested in that. Just none of this rings true. Everything about this seems really super forced. And I'm not even sure what the point of this page is, because then they all turn on him, and the idea is he's in the wrong and he doesn't know how to treat people. I guess, like, I suppose the whole point is he's again taking out everything horrible in his life right now on whoever happens to be around. But this whole situation is kind of confusing and pointless anyway. And once again, the whole point is just get him out of this city. And it would have almost been better to not even have this transition issue where instead he just says, yeah, I've kind of had enough of being in the same city with my ex-girlfriend who doesn't want me around, and I can't really be a superhero here, and that's what I want to do now, so I'll just leave. I'm not even sure that you would need a situation like this to give him that motivation necessarily, but if you do have to have that, then just make it he saves somebody from something horrible in an alleyway. And I don't know why it has to be a supervillain necessarily. I guess if he's been being a vigilante, he's just been stopping like kind of petty crimes. Okay, but it might have been an interesting angle, not to rewrite the whole thing, if he said this petty stuff, this like more small time stuff, is actually striking too close to home because of the trauma that Dinah went through. So I'd rather be fighting the like cosmic scale villains or the villains that want to rule whole cities. And I need the like costume thing because it's escapist. It feels less like reality. Maybe that's the angle that he should have taken. But anyway, more than a lukewarm reception for me on this one, and I've probably given it a little bit more time than it's due. The art is wonderful, and I always enjoy Aparo. Sometimes his faces can be a little bit cartoony, I guess, and he really likes drawing during this period anyway. Henchmen with long ponytails. He does a ton of that. Man, I love his city shots and the kind of gritty action of this. Like I said, take all the words out, and it's certainly a fun comic to look at least half to 2/3 of the pages. I will be back again tomorrow, and we're going to be starting Bat March. So every issue on Not Spawn Year through the month of March is going to be a Batman issue, and not just comics related to Batman, but all Batman titles. So we will be looking at specifically books with that character in them and with his name in the title, unless it's stuff like Detective or whatever, but Batman books. So look forward to that. I have no idea what I'm reviewing yet, but I'm going to jump around a lot and look at real old stuff, somewhat newer stuff, everything in between, and my goal is to hit a totally different title all 31 days, and I should have enough Batman titles to do that. I might have to do some repeats. I'm not sure yet. I haven't looked to see for sure if I can manage 31, and I kind of want to just get into it and see if it works out that way. I think that might be interesting. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again tomorrow. I was Captain Logan, and happy reading.